Very warm welcome for this morning session, for this webinar on enhancing capacities to deliver EU-funded cultural heritage projects in the Slovak Republic. So I see people are coming in and joining us. Great to have you with us. And we have already all our speakers ready to kick off. So welcome to all. I just wanted to remind you that this webinar is being recorded. And for our dear participants, you can feel free to use the chat if you want to flag any interesting initiatives that you are doing, or maybe even ask questions to some of our speakers too. So again, a very brief welcome from my side. I'm Ekaterina Travkina. I coordinate the work on culture, creative industries and global events at the OECD Center for Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Regions and Cities. Welcome, welcome. In the CFE, well, that's the abbreviation for the Center for Entrepreneurship, we really see culture as an integral part of regional development. So it creates jobs, it promotes innovation, it also makes our cities and regions attractive to live in and invest in, right? And it also brings a lot of social benefits. Today we have quite an exciting agenda and question to reflect on and to discuss is how in practice EU cohesion funds can help unlock this big potential, this big, well, as we often say, transformative power of culture to bring economic impacts and also to bring social impacts. So I'm very grateful for this opportunity to have this workshop at the invitation of the Slovak Ministry of Culture and the Slovak Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So thank you very much for this opportunity to deep dive in this theme and also to gather international peers around this around these issues. And we really do hope that from this morning you'll have some practical answers to your very practical questions that you wanted to discuss today. Well, with that very brief introduction, I would like to now hand over the welcome and the opening to our co-hosts, to our hosts in the Slovak Republic, to Mr. Branislav Salat, Director of the Department of International Cooperation, Ministry of Culture of the Slovak Republic. Please, Branislav, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Ekaterina. Thank you all. As you said, my name is Branislav Salat. I'm Director of Department of International Cooperation at the Ministry of Culture of the Slovak Republic. Ekaterina, just to clarify, you can hear me well, right? So I can continue. Good. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, colleagues, it is my great pleasure to welcome you today to this workshop on enhancing capacities to deliver EU-funded cultural heritage projects in Slovakia, organized jointly by the Ministry of Culture of the Slovak Republic and OECD. The topic that brings us together, the sound and the rational use of EU funds, is of vital importance, not just to us as a Slovakia, but to any European country. Across Europe, cultural heritage is not only a testimony of our shared past, but also a driver of sustainable regional development, tourism, and social cohesion. Yet to transform opportunities into tangible results, we must strengthen our institutional capacity, improve financial management, and learn how to balance conservation with the needs of communities and economies in the 21st century. That is why today's workshop is so valuable. It gives us the opportunity to exchange knowledge, learn from good practices across the EU, across our EU partners, and reflect on how Slovakia can better design, manage, and deliver projects that safeguard and revitalize our cultural heritage. I hope that this workshop will provide not only inspiration, but also concrete tools to strengthen our capacity to implement not only cultural heritage projects, but EU-funded projects in general, so that European funds serve as support for regional development across a wide range of sectors in both the state and non-state sectors. I wish you all a productive and engaging discussion. Thank you. So far, I'm open through the discussion to any question. Also, my colleague Miroslav Kania. At some of the moments, he will be also here on behalf of me, because I have some other things. But as I said, I wish you all a productive and engaging discussion. Thank you. I'm giving the words to Ekaterina. Thank you so much so far.
Thank you so much, Branislav. And indeed, you also invited some other ministries. So it's not just the Ministry of Culture colleagues and the cultural institutions that are with us today, but apparently there was quite a lot of interest from other colleagues from across the departments, because how you increase the capacity to manage cohesion funds is quite an important topic. Maybe, Helen, do you mind maybe putting up the overview of the agenda? Let's have a look of the agenda for this morning. Here we go. So we have quite a dense agenda, I must say, but so we wanted to start first with a bit of scene setting. So we're starting a bit large. So we wanted really to bring to you some of the lessons learned from across the OECD cities and regions, from across the OECD countries, so not just Europe, on what are the success factors, let's say, what are the do's and don'ts on culture-led regeneration. So we'll have my colleague Martha Bloom speak to us about this, drawing on our research. Then we'll turn to another colleague of ours here who will speak about practical strategies and actions to build beneficiary capacity under EU cohesion policy. So Varinia works with us in the CFE, in the Center for Entrepreneurship, and we're very happy to put these different niche expertises on culture, but also on cohesion fund management and multi-level governance in this workshop. And then we are really particularly happy to have with us DG Regio. Agnieszka will speak about cohesion policy supports for cultural heritage and provide an overview of some good practices there. So that will be hopefully a good introduction to then a very practical peer exchange. And you see that we have a very good set of countries and experts. And I know that some of these experts were working on these issues for years and years, for 2 or 3 programming periods already. So there is a lot of expertise in this room. And we'll hear, of course, we'll start with Slovakia. So it will be great to hear from colleagues from the Slovak Ministry of Culture on their experience on culture, on state-owned national cultural monuments, restoration programs. Then we'll move to Italy. Sandra will speak to us about culture and cultural heritage to redevelop dismissed places and tackle territorial disparities. So very much looking forward to what you're going to say, Sandra. And I had a very quick scan of your presentation. It really looks very interesting, with a couple of also success stories there, not just answering to very technical questions, but a couple of success inspiring stories too. Then we'll move to Bulgaria, and Evelina will speak to us about support for cultural heritage and the cohesion policy in Bulgaria, to share some experiences there. And then we'll go to Ireland to hear about Thrive project. It's a project that focuses on urban centers and tackles and helps them to thrive, let's say, through adaptive reuse of cultural heritage buildings. And then we'll conclude this session with some reflection from my colleagues here at the CFE, the Center for Entrepreneurship, giving us a bit of a broader perspective on the administrative capacity building for EU cohesion policy, drawing on a very recent work with quite a number of countries and a couple of reports that we also listed in the agenda for further reading. So voilà, and then of course we'll have a bit of moments to ask questions. Please feel free to pose your questions in the chat, and I'll also voice them to our speakers. Voilà, so that's, I think, the plan for the day. That's enough for me talking, and then now let's really start the workshop with this scene setting. So now I'm turning to Martha Bloom, who is an economist and policy analyst in my unit here at the OECD. Martha, please.
Thanks very much, Katia. Hi, it's a pleasure to meet you all, to e-meet you. I'm hoping now that you can all see my screen as well as hear me. So jam-packed agenda is to give a bit of an outline of the type of work that we do here at the OECD on global events and culture and creative sectors. I'll explain what we mean by those terms in a minute. then just to remind us all why culture and creative sectors are important. So I know there are Ministry of Culture is here, there are also some other ministries, so we thought it'd be helpful just to remind everyone the size and the shape of the sector, why we think it's important to invest in these sectors. And then we'll get into the main content of the presentation, which is really what is cultural-led regeneration, how does it materialize, and some really concrete examples of it in action. And then finally wrapping up with some of the lessons learned from decades now of culture-led regeneration. So as Katja mentioned, all the OECD colleagues on the call today are from the OECD Centre for Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Regions and Cities, or the CFE. So the CFE has 4 committees that make up its membership. So we have the Regional Development Policy, Committee on SMEs and Entrepreneurship, the Tourism Committee, and the Local Employment and Economic Development Committee. And you'll see that culture as a sort of topic area sits within the Local Employment and Economic Development, which firstly, I think, points to how we view the role of culture here at the OECD, right, as a tool. We really link all these different themes. So we link culture to tourism, to SMEs, and most importantly, to regional development. So how we're maybe a little bit different from organizations like UNESCO is exactly that. We really try to connect culture to these broader policy issues. So employment, social cohesion, innovation, well-being, the environment, etc. We also work with governments to help them adapt their existing policies on some of these areas to better suit the needs of culture and creative sectors, because we know that they have slightly different characteristics, which require both targeted policy support and slight adaptations of existing policy supports. And of course, as the OECD, we do a lot of work to improve internationally comparable statistics on the size and the shape of culture and creative sectors in order to build this evidence base. So what does that look like practically in terms of our output? So we conduct country and regional reviews. You'll see here on the screen just a few of our most recent reviews. We're part of what we refer to as the global dialogue. So that means we work with G20, we work very closely with other international organizations to help shape the global agenda on culture and creative sectors. And then we produce a lot of standard setting guides and toolkits. So we have a guide for local governments, communities and museums to capitalize on the role of museums in local development. We have a whole host of work around what we call global events, and by that we mean large-scale sporting, business and cultural events, so things like the Olympics and Paralympic Games, things like European Capitals of Culture. We have some really practical toolkits around how to maximise the benefits of those events for local development. And then we also, through our sister centre in Trento in Italy, run a yearly capacity building workshop for policymakers on a range of different themes. So that's what we do. Why do we do it? Well, we know that culture and creative sectors can drive economic growth. So what you'll see here on the right-hand side of the screen in this graph is the proportion of all employment that can be attributed to culture and creative sectors in the Slovak Republic. So you'll see on average in the Slovak Republic, just under 3% of all employment is culture and creative employment. That rises to 6.5% in the capital region. And this is quite a common thing. Capital regions tend to have far higher proportions of culture and creative sector employment. But you'll see that this is a non-trivial sector, right? 7% of jobs, that's a lot of jobs. In 2023, culture and creative sector businesses in Slovakia contributed 665 million euros in GVA. So it's not only jobs that they're creating, but they're also generating a huge amount of value added. Alongside that economic benefit, they also bring a whole host of social benefits. So social cohesion, contributing to health and well-being, contributing to sustainability agendas. And I think it's really this mix of the economic and the social benefits that have made them such a priority for many cities, regions and countries across the OECD. So for example, a large proportion of smart specialisation strategies in the EU have been related to cultural and creative sector activities. So now that sort of gives this overview of why culture, but now practically how can we use culture? How can we use culture for economic development, for specifically culture-led regeneration? So we can think about culture-led regeneration as very broadly falling into four categories, right? Four different approaches. So the first approach is investment in large physical infrastructure. The second is investment in grassroots community infrastructure. So there's some of the difference between the top-down or the bottom-up for infrastructure. Then there's investment in cultural districts or cultural quarters or creative hubs, depending on which terminology you use. And then the importance of cultural events, which I think is often overlooked as a really important tool for culture-led regeneration. So I'm going to go through now just a few examples of some of these approaches. So I think the large cultural infrastructure approach is probably what we all think of when we think of culture-led regeneration, right? We all think of the Guggenheim in Bilbao, these really big investments in huge museums or art galleries, etc. What is equally as important for culture-led regeneration, and actually is far more common, is the reuse of derelict industrial spaces. And I think we have a few examples of that coming up in the second half of this workshop as well. There are real benefits to this approach in that it helps to preserve industrial heritage, which is a really important factor often for communities, for a sense of belonging, a sense of place and history. And on a more practical side as well, it can also be a lot cheaper than building brand new buildings to regenerate existing buildings. And it can be more in keeping with community needs. So as well as the large infrastructure investments, a second approach is to support the grassroots community infrastructure. So that can be physical. So we can think of things like cultural centres, things like libraries, which play a hugely important role, increasingly important role in many different areas of community life. But we can also think of non-physical infrastructure investments. So investments in networks, in membership groups, in community groups, policies which support or preserve those networks, those groups, can be incredibly important in creating this grassroots bottom-up sense of community cohesion to support ongoing culture-led regeneration projects. Also within this sort of bucket, we can think of public art, so street art, as well as statues and monuments, which we know have a really big impact on people's sense of pride in place and their sense of belonging to a community. Then the third approach to culture-led regeneration is cultural districts. So here there are sort of two different types of cultural district, if you like. So the first is organically emerging historic quarters. So you can think about the Jewellery Quarter in Birmingham, for example, which has been around for almost hundreds of years. It really grew organically. And here policies about supporting and nurturing and preserving that organic cluster to be maintained. But then the other approach is to create new clusters, right? So where there was some creative activity going on before, but it wasn't a sort of established. And so here a really great example of this kind of approach is in Colombia. They have orange development areas where the government provided really quite strong tax incentives for culture and creative businesses to relocate to specific areas in order to try to create and grow these creative districts. Some of these culture and creative districts can focus on just one subsector, so just jewellery, or they can encompass multiple different subsectors. And then finally, the role of events, so festivals, biennials and triennials. And of course, the largest of these is the European Capitals of Culture, which I know Slovakia has hosted in 2013, and you are all set to host again in 2026. So I'm sure many of you on this call will know full well the potential for these type of global events to catalyze ongoing culture-led regeneration processes, including some of the other approaches that I've mentioned already. So to really catalyse investment in large infrastructure, investment in grassroots infrastructure, and investment in districts. And that brings us on to, I think, the main lesson that we've learned from decades of cultural regeneration, which is that cultural regeneration works best when multiple approaches are combined over time. So the idea that you could invest in a big new museum and magically the whole area will be regenerated is unlikely. Similarly, the fact that you could invest in one district of a town and then suddenly the whole region has regeneration is unlikely. Really, it's about combining approaches as part of broader cultural strategies over the medium to long term. We also know that success of cultural-led regeneration depends really heavily on local buy-in and co-creation. And that sounds really obvious, but it's surprising how often that gets overlooked. And there are some really concrete and interesting policies that governments can look to implement in trying to generate this local buy-in. So participatory budgeting, where citizens get to vote on how governments spend part of their money, is a really great way of doing that sort of co-creation. And there's also things like a percent for art, where any new development in a certain area has to invest a percentage of their development costs in public art. We also know that large cultural infrastructure investments are most successful when they're aligned with actual community needs. Again, it sounds simple, but often this gets really overlooked. So there's a really important role for cultural mapping here to actually see what cultural facilities are available to a community, what already exist, and where there are gaps. And in supporting creative districts, as well as the other types of cultural regeneration, policy support is really, really important. And there's a range of more ongoing policy supports, as well as these sort of initial investments in a large flagship building, for example. Things like tax incentives, zoning for cultural use, implementing planning controls to protect creative spaces are really, really important tools in helping to promote this more holistic sense of cultural regeneration. And finally, I would be remiss, I think, if I didn't mention the elephant in the room, gentrification. This is the criticism which is always leveled against cultural regeneration. But what about gentrification, right? You have these amazing stories of areas being completely revitalized, and then the very communities who made them vibrant in the first place are displaced. They can't afford to live there anymore because house prices are soaring. So it happens, but it isn't an inevitable outcome. And there are things that policymakers can do to help to mitigate those risks. So things around rent controls, around ring fencing social housing as part of developments, around having dedicated anti-displacement plans. And there are some examples of that in our latest work, as well as some of the things I've already mentioned. So the importance of local buy-in and the importance of co-creation. So I think I'm probably out of time already, but I'll end by a little bit of shameless self-promotion, which is that for many of these issues, the OECD have some really quite concrete and practical advice. So if you're interested, we have a whole bunch of toolkits and guides on how to maximize the benefit of events like Capitals of Culture for local development. We have a fantastic guide which we wrote with ICOM, the International Museums Organization, for local governments, communities and museums to bring those communities together around regeneration through museums, and our latest publication on the role of cultural regeneration in place transformation, which has more examples than I've been able to cover today. So I'll end there. Thank you very much. And I look forward to the rest of the very exciting workshop.
Thank you very much, Martha. And maybe it is indeed useful to, this framework of the 4 different types of cultural regeneration interventions that we came up with, just to maybe organize your thoughts when you are thinking about what kind of regeneration you would like to for your place. maybe one of the things that we see from our work on culture and regional development is that unfortunately there is so little policy evaluation there, and we still have this gap in terms of impact assessment and better impact assessment. We always speak about the number of people who participate in programs, the number of people who go to museums, the number of visitors who come to a place because of the cultural attraction, and maybe who spent money in the local hotels, and we can even calculate those induced effects. But that's about it, right? And it's often not in a comparable way, not in a comparable way, so that cities and countries can compare themselves amongst themselves. And we're even not, well, there are some attempts, but still very little done on social impact of all these interventions, also in a cross-country comparable way. So there is a lot of work still to advance in this area. Well, thanks so much, Martha. I think it's really a very broad, good scene setting for our session. And now I would like to turn to my colleague, Varinia. You bring to this table this years and years of expertise of working with European countries and OECD countries as well on multi-level governance, and very specifically on strengthening the governance of EU funds under the cohesion policy and the beneficiary capacities, because you worked with Europe, but also with quite a number of European countries in depth on these issues. Varinia, please.
Thanks, Katerina and Marta, for the invitation, and also to everyone who's participating. I have to say that I very rarely talk about culture in the work that we do, and so this is really such a nice change. I was really, really happy to see, to be part of this. I am going to, however, change a bit the tenor of our conversation and probably have it be a little bit less colorful and lively and pretty as Marta's slides. But I would like to talk about 3 points with respect to administrative capacity building for cohesion policy funds, and in hope that this is also going to be of help and value in generating funding for cultural initiatives. So let me share my screen and hope that this works. Is that being shared?
It's coming, yes, maybe full screen and it'll be better.
Yeah, I'm gonna full screen it. There we go. So I hope everyone can see that. And yeah, good. So what I'd like to do is spend a little bit of time talking about some actions and strategies and actions to build beneficiary capacity under cohesion policy that comes directly from our work. But before I do that, I think I would just want to take a few moments to highlight sort of the OECD's approach to administrative capacity building, because we have quite a specific framework for it. Then focus on the beneficiaries and also start to put Slovakia into that context. And finally move on to sort of this notion of the need for an integrated investment and whole of government approach, really focusing specifically on Slovakia. So the OECD's approach to administrative capacity building, this is something that we began working on in, I think, 2018. And in this, at the request of DG Regio and its administrative capacity building unit. And what the work did in the work that we did with managing authorities, both at the national and the regional level, one of the things that became very clear was a framework for thinking about building administrative capacity. And this framework we would call fondly the onion, because it really builds out on itself. And at the core of this framework are people, and the people in the management and control system, the people in the managing authorities. And here the questions that are really important to think about as actors in cohesion policy funding and the management and control system, the MCS, are, what is the ability to attract, recruit, and retain staff? what is their learning and development process. So this was something that we really spent time looking at, just as we spent time looking at the organizational dimension of this. What are the leadership skills necessary? What are the organizational structures? How do the different parts work together within the organization? And what are the competencies necessary? Moving further beyond that, we also saw, okay, strategic planning and priority setting in any programming period is really important. And so how is that done? How are different aspects coordinated? How does project planning happen? The calls, the implementation, the procurement, how are projects monitored and evaluated? So we move a little bit beyond the organization into how the funds are used. When we first started this framework, we did not include beneficiaries and stakeholders. So we went from strategic planning to enabling framework conditions. But as we were working, what we were seeing was how fundamental to the use of the cohesion policy funds of a strong partnership between beneficiaries and managing authorities was. And what was interesting is in the course of the work, because we've been working consistently on this since 2018, is that there's been a shift in the perspective of managing authorities towards beneficiaries. And they're no longer really thought of, or they're less thought of as the scapegoats. Oh, we're not using the funds because the beneficiaries don't have the capacity. Now it's a question of how do we work with our beneficiaries better? So that is, and I'll get to that in a moment. And finally, the framework conditions in this onion. So what we mean by framework conditions are the parameters in which the managing authorities or the MCS works but cannot actively change. It may be able to influence it, it may be able to nudge it, but things like regulatory frameworks and conditionalities or budgeting and co-financing, that's really hard to change. So just very briefly on these different parts, when it comes to people in organization, really one of the main things is to think about the people in organization strategy. What is the MA and the IB's strategic objectives for their organization and their employees? And do the employees and other stakeholders in the MCS share a common vision and understand their roles properly? And do they work together? In addition, there are questions here with respect to what is governance and leadership supportive of administrative capacity building and of change, actually, and of organizational change. And it's coming all the way down to the people, which form the basis of all of this, is then that is where you have your impact. So you go from your strategy to your leadership to how your organization is structured to the people. The third pillar, the third layer of this onion was the strategic planning, the coordination, and the implementation dimension. And here, some things to consider is, is coherence being ensured between national and sectoral frameworks? Are the priorities reflecting national, regional development needs? Is there support for cross-jurisdictional or cross-sector cooperation? It's also important to make sure that coordination and communication is optimized throughout the management and control system. So this includes, for example, a timely sharing of knowledge or optimizing exchange opportunities with peers. Call design is just as important. So aligning project calls with and project calls and selection with beneficiary capacity. That was something that we saw a lot, that often was very unaligned. And ensuring the visibility of calls. And finally, expanding performance measurement practices, a little bit what Martha was saying. There is often a need for more data. There's often a need to create more robust measurement systems. The fourth pillar on beneficiaries and stakeholders, we're going to spend some more time on, but really, in terms of beneficiary capacity, one of the things that we found in the work we did is how important it is to provide tailored support, tailored and quality support, because beneficiaries are different. They fall into different groups, and to have very effective communication and ongoing information exchange. And you have the beneficiary groups, but you also have these external stakeholders that need to be considered. So policymakers at the national and subnational level, or other public authorities, or civil society, or professional organizations. And here it's also important to understand their specific needs, but it's also important to bring them into this beneficiary capacity building concept, but they need to be able to do that themselves. So there's also a question of building their capacity. And finally, these framework conditions that I mentioned. So I'm not going to really go through this because we'll run out of time, but the four big ones are how your MCS is set up, what are the frameworks, the legislative and regulatory frameworks. Procurement is a really big one, I think, as we all know. And finally, the audit and control system. So in this process, one of the things we did see was how, as I said, how important it was to be working with the beneficiaries and to have the right tools and the right approach to supporting them. So we went into another project that really focused on beneficiaries and supporting managing authorities to better help their beneficiaries in terms of the project needs, how to use the cohesion policy funds. And at the beginning, what we were hearing from beneficiaries was a whole series of different but recurring capacity gaps, both at the national and at the subnational level, which had to do with, experience working with other partners, or not having time to build their own capacity. And some of these gaps, which are the numbers that you have on the side, included gaps in institutional memory or constraints in receiving support, or very interestingly, really not so much knowledge on important themes to cohesion policy. So for example, being able to understand or know about, what is going on with net zero or circular economy or social innovation. And those gaps then translate into less ability to apply for funds. Now, that's what we were hearing from beneficiaries. What we were hearing from managing authorities is that there are a lot of them. And there are even more beneficiaries, and this can be very challenging. So there are about 300 managing authorities in the 2014 to 2020 programming period, and 600,000 beneficiaries. So it's really hard to do one-to-one support. That's just not possible because there are also over 1.8 million projects. Now, what we heard from heads of managing authorities is that 44% of them felt that providing this really tailored and targeted support was going to be challenging. So what we wanted to do was find ways to make that less challenging. And one of the processes here was to really understand the beneficiary journey and mapping capacity needs. So thinking about the use of cohesion policy funds from the perspective of the beneficiary, not from the perspective of the managing authority or the IB. So again, I'm not going to go into all of these bits, but it really starts before you engage with the program to understand what the needs are, going through the programming process, moving into calls and project preparations, including, properly interpreting eligibility and selection criteria on the part of the MA and getting the right documents together. For the beneficiaries, but then they move into this implementation process and finally the monitoring and reporting. And the thing is that the beneficiary journey should go through all of these 5 processes, not just calls and implementation. So they need to be involved in this process. And the other point that is extremely clear in this work is that it isn't just about one actor, but it's about their interaction and the relationship. So it's an MAIB beneficiary relationship, and it's really 2 ways. So it's important to understand that each group has different perspectives, but that beneficiaries really have a lot to offer and they know a lot. So listening to them is important, and that they are in this sort of what happens with the managing authorities is that they find themselves in a tough spot because they're sort of in a sandwich. They're between policymakers and the beneficiaries, and they're having to translate the needs of both and the aims and objectives and challenges of both. So it becomes very important to really create a trust-based partnership for the long term between the managing authorities and the beneficiaries. So a few examples in beneficiary capacity building. For example, in Greece, the Greek Management and Organization Unit created expert teams that were known as flying consultants who would go to beneficiaries in remote and island areas to give them technical support because they often lacked it and they lacked easy access to it. In Latvia, the Central Finance and Contracting Agency created an online tool that supports public authorities to distribute project risks between public and private partners, especially in infrastructure projects. So that makes it less scary for potential beneficiaries. And in Poland, the Center for Advisory Support really was focusing on how to boost the institutional capacity of local authorities so that they can partake in they can be more strategic, especially in designing infrastructure projects. So finally, what's happening in Slovakia and what does this mean for the situation in Slovakia? And I think this is a very interesting chart because what this shows is how investment levels versus EU cohesion policy programs and how it divides up between national, regional, and interreg. Now, what we're seeing is regional programs tend to have not big envelopes of funds, and they tend to be lower in terms of value. And their specific objectives are more spread out. That's your horizontal axis. Whereas national programs may have fewer specific objectives and higher envelopes. Now, what's interesting here is Slovakia is an outlier. It's not even on this chart because it has a very centralized national program. It has 16 billion euros worth of funding. So it goes beyond that 12. But 37 specific objectives. So it would be beyond the x-axis and beyond the y-axis. So that just helps give an idea as to where Slovakia is in this chart, and what it highlights that what is being called for is a very strong coordination, especially with this notion of integrated investments. So we were working with Slovakia in a TSI project to increase EU fund absorption and provide more results-oriented investments. And here we went through our onion process and came up with some very specific actions that related to enhancing coordination and beneficiary support. So with respect to human resources management, for example, upgrading the ITMS system would be very helpful, including to standardize certain forms, etc., and having sort of quarterly coordination meetings. With respect to programming and implementation, developing evidence-based analysis of project preparation would be fundamental, and a roadmap for enhancing project preparation and beneficiary support, so to align those a little bit more. And the procurement, really centralizing a question and answer repository. So I have gone far over time, and I thank you very much for your patience. There are a couple of key takeaways. Long-term system-wide effort is required for capacity building. A collaborative relationship is fundamental with beneficiaries, and reinforcing coordination across the whole management and control system. Thank you very, very much.
No, thank you so much, Varinia. And for me, it was an extremely interesting presentation to listen to. And we're so lucky that you have this expertise of bringing the perspectives of managing authorities and of the beneficiaries. So you put yourselves in the shoes of these hundreds and hundreds of beneficiaries to describe clearly their journey. So it's really pretty clear for us, but and also that you were lucky that you have this project on technical support instrument project with Slovakia as well. So we will bring in some of your lessons into the notes that we'll be producing out of this workshop as well. It also struck me a little bit when you were saying that one of the barriers for the success of the cohesion funds programs is sometimes limited knowledge about cohesion policy objectives, such as, for example, social innovation you mentioned, or maybe circular economy, which will in turn explain some of the gaps in the implementation probably. So that's quite interesting for me to note. But now we are particularly happy to have with us DG Regio. And I'm now turning and giving the floor to Agnieszka, and it will be great for us to hear from you about cohesion policy support for cultural heritage. And I think you were thinking also to provide some good practices and good practice examples as well for us as part of this big setting. Please, Agnieszka, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Ekaterina, for the introduction, and good morning to everyone. Thank you for the invitation to this seminar, because I think this is for us also a very good opportunity to share our perspective. It's my great pleasure to be able to represent DG Regio in the seminar, and especially my unit that has a very nice name, Cities, Communities and People. So we are really close to people, close to communities, close to cities. So I hope that my presentation will make the perspective of the cohesion policy and maybe closer to you. This is really a very difficult task to have very few minutes, but to put as much information as possible for you also to think and to reflect on, but I will be trying to control myself. So let me share my screen. I will have the presentation. Sorry. I hope this is visible now. Can you please confirm?
Yes, and maybe in full screen. Super.
Okay, so let me turn off my camera, because I'm not sure about the quality of the connection. So I think it will be easier. So first of all, having only this limited time, I'm sorry, I cannot turn. Apologies, but I cannot.
Do you want us to put up our slide? You will tell us next if you want.
Maybe that will be, apologies for that, but I cannot
No worries.
turn down the slides, so I will stop sharing.
Helen, maybe you can help us with the presentation. Super. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So having this limited time, let me briefly present the basics of the cohesion policy support to culture and cultural heritage. Then I will concentrate on some characteristics of good projects in the area. And then we will conclude with providing some sources of knowledge and inspiration. So could you turn the slide, please? So let me start by recalling that the 21-27 programming period, culture and cultural heritage are supported under all policy objectives of the cohesion policy, but most notably under policy objective number 4, a more social and inclusive Europe, and also policy objective number 5, a Europe closer to citizens. This focuses on local and territorial development, which is so close to our hearts. So I think that it's worth noting that culture has a growing recognition in the development process, and this must be viewed not as a luxury, but as a driver of economic, social, and territorial cohesion. And it plays more and more prominent role also in the current discussion, also in the context of now what we call the right to stay. So the ability for people to live and develop in their home regions. And this is especially in the context of demographic change that most of the regions and territories of Europe face. Of course, it is undeniable that culture plays a very important role for the sense of European identity, for the values, also for democracy. So I think that we should really think about culture in this multidimensional perspective and really make use of it in all the plannings and all the investments that we are planning to do. So, well, the area still faces a lot of challenges. The challenges reflect unequal geographical distribution, unequal access to culture, a fragmentation of the cultural sector, access to funding, climate change, digitalization, under-addressed skills development, but also working conditions and social protection, working conditions of people working in culture, but not only. So all these things influence planning of projects and planning of interventions. So investments in culture should be led in two ways, let's say. First of all, we fight for transformation of the sector, let's say, but we want to strengthen the environmental, social, and economic sustainability, and first of all, the resilience of culture. But another strand that is very important to stress is a broader access to culture. So reaching out to broader audiences, they have positive impact on local communities and creation of stable and quality employment. If you can if you can go to another slide, here we can see how support for culture and cultural heritage is planned. So it is present in many programs, more than 100 programs across 19 member states. But this is a small caveat. This slide is taken from the Cohesion Open Data Platform. So it shows only the intervention field 166. While, as I mentioned, because interventions and investments in culture can be applied in all the policy objectives, the overall sum might be bigger. I think that we can skip the next slide and also the slide that shows the allocation to culture and cultural heritage. But in fact, maybe just a little stop. It shows that Slovakia really puts a lot of importance to investments in culture. And in total amounts, it takes the second place. So for the country, which is relatively small, I think that this must be noted, that you can see the potential, and I think that this is the good way for the future. So maybe we can now concentrate a little bit, and if we can go to another slide, on examples of actions that are included in 21-27 programs. So first of all, the types of actions that regions are implementing deal with upgrading cultural infrastructure, different forms of sites, different forms of places, of course, conservation and revitalization of tangible but also intangible heritage. We concentrate on ensuring their adaptive reuse and integration into community life. Of course, digitalization of new technologies. This is a very strong trend, and we see that, well, the resources in museums and other culture heritage institutions need to be digitalized for better use. Greening and energy efficiency, another strand, very important in the context of all of the situation and the broader situation with the climate change and European Green Deal objectives. A very important part that is inclusive cultural participation. That means promoting social innovation and access to arts for all the age groups, all the ability and disability constraints, so that everyone can really make use of culture. So if we can go to another slide, I will present very briefly some key elements that the good culture heritage project should encompass. So first of all, we concentrate on holistic vision and integrated approach. So what does it mean? So this is combining physical restoration with other strands of actions like education, organizing events, of course, but very important community engagement. These are projects that encompass many activities, many stakeholders. They are difficult to execute, but have a bigger potential to bring better results. ensuring social inclusion and accessibility. Of course, this is making heritage available to all citizens. Good projects will link heritage, sustainable tourism, and the local economy. So the economic dimension of culture-led projects are very important. So they generate local jobs, they support SMEs in creative sectors. These are the projects that we are looking for. Of course, they need to embrace digitalization and greening alongside strong multi-stakeholder governance, ensuring that local authorities, civil society, and the private sectors all have a seat at this table and all participate in planning, but also execution of the project. So this integrated approach is what truly transforms cultural heritage projects into sustainable development engine, we can say, and we can really see a very strong driving role for cultural projects for the development of economy. Now I will present very briefly 3 projects that I think can be a good inspiration. Can we go to the next slide? So this is a bit of my subjective selection, but I think that they show these dimensions that I have just stressed. So the first, this is the Polish project that concentrates on digitization and shows how the digitization can be executed in a modern way. So this is its open national digitization and sharing of collections of the National Museum in Warsaw. This is a project that was a candidate for Regio Stars Award, so the best EU-funded projects that are worth promoting and worth sharing. So the way that the resources were digitized and the access that was offered through this is really remarkable and is really worth promoting. But of course, you can read about these projects in available resources. I will also give some hints where to find inspirations. But what is good about this project is that it contributes, of course, to heritage protection, but it supports cohesion policy objectives. It links digitalization, cultural accessibility, and innovation. And it demonstrates how a traditional institution can also modernize operations while reaching new audiences and contributing to local and creative economies. So I think that this is a very good example to follow. Another one, which is presented in another slide, is the Jacobs Access. So this is the project that I would like to highlight because of this very strong social inclusion and accessibility content and aspect. So first of all, besides all the innovations that were absolutely necessary to implement the project, I would really like to point out the way that the way of St. James, which is so renowned and so often used by people with no disability problems, was for some long time inaccessible for people with disabilities. So the project transformed the way to accessible to people with physical but also mental disabilities. So I think that it's worth noting and worth reading about the details of the project. So this this exerted positive regional impact, improved accessibility, increased visitor numbers, but also supports local tourism as such. It influenced also SME craft sector and influenced the rural and less developed areas along the route. And maybe the last project that I would like to briefly outline, this is the next slide, thank you. This is a little bit older project, but it also, the previous one, if you could, sorry, I was maybe too quick. I wouldn't, the project about the Via Egnatia route. So this is a bit older project, but I wanted to flag it because it shows that culture and cultural tourism projects must be really sustainable and must be foreseen for longer use. So this project was using traditional research and modern technologies and really changed the Via Ignatia into a particularly strong example of an integrated approach. So we want to present that as an example of an integrated approach, the cooperation between communities, cooperation between municipalities, so cross-border cooperation as well. Of course, digital innovation and economic development, tourist diversification. So this is a very thorough project that encompasses many areas of activities, but really brought good results and can be shown as a good example to follow. So in the next slides, you will find some recommendations where to find maybe okay, so these are, I will share the presentation so you will see that recommendations where you can find some inspirations for good practices, for knowledge, but as the closing final remarks, I would like to point out 3 things, and this can be also used for further food for thought and for our further discussions. So first of all, it's very important to integrate culture into territorial development, to empower local and regional actors, and ensure broad citizen participation. I think that this is really important. Maybe so far it has not been highlighted so much, but especially also the access to the elderly that will constitute a larger part of the society. People with disabilities, this is quite obvious, but really access to all and make it usable to all. The next thing is preparing long-term plans for sites, for places, including broadening offer to new audiences, digitalization, greening measures, but also in this current situation, also crisis management plans, because we could see the first days in the Ukrainian war. And I was especially struck by one museum, by the pictures from one museum in Lviv, which was hiding the treasures, hiding the resources that they had, with all the people helping in case of to protect that. So this is unfortunately something that we also have to take into consideration. And something that is very important and that we are executing right now is sharing lessons, doing peer learning and disseminating good practices, because through doing that, we can be more effective, we can have more experience, we can share the views, we can lose less time, so we can gain knowledge, time, and make the projects more effective. So thank you very much for that. I hope that the discussion will be fruitful, and I'm also open to questions if I may contribute. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Agnieszka. And we will circulate the presentation with all these different examples and links as well. So yeah, clearly you showed how culture can be, well, whatever we say, driver, enabler of regional development, integral part of regional development. So that's, I think, pretty clear now. And we do hope that this approach will be further promoted in the Culture Compass that we are waiting to be released in the next couple of months or weeks. And you very rightly pointed to some of the fragilities of the sector, and we also totally agree with your assessment. So for the sector to play this role in regional development, some of its weaknesses should be addressed, and we're thinking about the precariousness of work in the sector, about the fragmentation of the sector sometimes, about the need to ensure equal access to culture across, well, regardless of income or education level of people, and regardless of the place they live in the urban peripheries or in rural areas as well. So these are the things that really need probably support, investment, and policies to address this kind of gaps and barriers. Well, thank you so much to our speakers for this scene setting. I think it was really broad and rich, and really a very good introduction to what will follow now. Now we'll hear from a few countries, and they will tell really very concrete national experiences on how this works in practice in their countries. And so thank you to all the introduction speakers, and now I'm welcoming our international peer exchange session speakers. And we'll kick off and we'll start with our host, with the Slovak Republic. And I'm very happy to introduce Peter Duranka, General Director of EU Fund Section, Ministry of Culture of the Slovak Republic, our host today. And Peter, you were planning to speak about the restoration of state-owned national cultural monuments. So that's, I guess, the priority of the current programming period. So let's maybe turn to you, and we're very happy to hear from you now. Thank you. Give us a sign if you want us to share the presentation, Peter. Sandra, we might turn to you while Peter is getting his presentation ready.
Okay, no problem. Can you hear me?
Please, now.
Okay.
Yeah, wait. Maybe we have. Let us see. Peter, do you want us to share the presentation, or are you happy to share your slides yourself?
Okay. Very well. So sorry, I was as an attendee, not as a panelist. So that's somebody probably fixed here. So I will just share my screen. Please give me just a second.
So we can see it.
Okay. Okay. So we can see it. It's everything is fine now. So thank you all the previous speakers. It was really enriching, all the information that I was getting right now. So I'm really thankful. Really, it was really good for me. So I will just start. So good morning, distinguished representatives of the OECD, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to join you today on behalf of the Ministry of the Culture of the Slovak Republic. My name is Peter Duranka, and it was as it was said before, I'm the representative of the section of EU funds. So I really and truly appreciate this opportunity to present you one of our, I would say, flagship initiatives, the national program, the restoration of state-owned national cultural heritage. Everything implemented under the program Slovakia 2021-2027. So today I will briefly walk you through the several key points, as you can see. So I will explain you what the new program period is about. Also, what does program Slovakia represents. Also, we will take a look on the pictures, of course, on some eligible national heritage sites, and then we will go through also financial management, also how the staffing and the lead of the project works here, and in the end, how we control and monitor all the national heritage sites, and of course, we will sum it up. So as you said before, it's a really important project for us because the 2021-2027 programming period brings us a renewed commitment to protect Slovakia's most treasured heritage sites, and in some really sustainable and inclusive way. So our mission is really beautiful. It's safeguarding national cultural heritage for a future generation. To be honest, we approach this cultural heritage not just as some passive legacy, but as an active driver of some economical or regional economical growth and also tourism. So this new program period is a little bit. It was a little bit challenging from us from the start, to be honest, because Ministry of Culture used to be an intermediate body for EU funds before, and now our role has switched. So the Ministry of Culture acts now as a beneficiary of support from the Ministry of Investments, Regional Development, and informatization here in Slovakia. So we are the beneficiary now, beneficiary of support. So the Ministry of Informatization, Regional Development, and Investments is the managing authority of the whole program Slovakia, and we have a grant agreement with them effective of since 7th of December 2024. And the total allocation for us in this program is 157.9 million euros. As I stated in the introduction, what is Program Slovakia about? I will be really, it's really briefly, I will just explain you that the Program Slovakia intend to rise the quality of life of the citizens here in Slovakia, also competitiveness of our country, and also a little bit reduce the regional disparities here in Slovakia. So that's the goal of the program Slovakia, but we are implemented, as probably every speaker in front of me, in line. We are implemented in line with the cohesion policy objective 4, so more social and inclusive Europe. And the specific objective is RSO 4.6, strengthening the role of the culture and sustainable tourism. So this is probably a better looking slide, I would say. So now you can take a look on some of the eligible national heritage sites. We divided them into the 2 phases. The first phase is from March till June 2025. Here you can take a look on some of them. So there is like Zvolen Castle, Castle and Monastery of Modrý Kameň, even Gallery of Ludovita Full. So it's not just just about the castles and monasteries, it's also about galleries, or even the Carthusian Church on the on my left down corner is a Carthusian Church in Červený Kláštor, literally like 20 meters from the Polish border. And we got also the famous ones like the Spiš Castle or Bojnice Castle, but probably as it is under UNESCO, you already know them very well. So that's why I picked the a little bit less known. So this is the second phase of the grant, of our open grant. So there are probably one of the biggest museums here in Slovakia, and also smaller monasteries like Ethnographic Museum in the Martin, or the first historical building of Matica Slovenska. So probably you know some of them. Okay, so co-financing and financial framework. We are under approved state aid scheme, which is effective from 26th of July 2024. The financial structure is quite straightforward. So it's 85% from the EU funds, and the rest 15% is from the state budget. We are kind of a little bit flexible in terms of financing also, because there is option for pre-financing, reimbursement, or the combination of the both. It depends from the institution, because if there is in their financial situation, if there is financial situation really good, they can use the reimbursement, or it depends on their needs. So they are using probably each of the option, as you can see. Okay, the project management. The whole project is managed just by my section, so section of the EU funds. In total, I have here 14 employees, which are 11 are internal and 3 of them are external. So all of them have more than 7 years experience of implementation and management of EU funds. So I'm really proud of them, and they got responsibilities like preparing documentation, drafting memorandum cooperation agreements, submitting now payment requests, and of course, my favorite is ad hoc tasks. In terms or to guarantee transparency and compliance, we work closely with a consultancy firm that provide us on-site support directly on the site, on cultural heritage site. This is kind of our assistance. Probably, I think in the previous presentation there was a Greece mentioned, like flying specialists or something like that. So this is something that works also here in Slovakia. So we have a consultancy firm external that is providing support from directly on site. And this help us really increase the quality of the project, of the preparation of the project. And then it can also improve some risk management predictions, what we really can predict. What is not predictable, we cannot, of course, and reduce also some administrative burden from our section, but also administrative burden from the on-site institutions. And of course, everything is, all the communication is going through the secure ebook system with electronic signatures. So we have a full compliance with EU and Slovak legislation. So in conclusion, the Ministry of Culture of Slovak Republic stands today as a reliable and experienced beneficiary. Personally, I think our work shows that culture is not just some cost, as they are telling us, but from my perspective and the section perspective, it is an investment. It is an investment to the people, to communities, and to our shared values that we have here in Slovakia and in Europe. And I would say we are proud to contribute to European culture and to get together more stronger, and we can participate on the European culture also. So thank you very much for attention. If you have any question, please do not hesitate to ask me. And thank you, and I'm looking forward to some discussion.
Thank you so much, Peter, for this presentation and for explaining to us the current priorities and objectives of what you are doing now and the focus areas. So thank you very much. Now it's my pleasure to turn to Sandra. Sandra, of course, you have in your pocket the years of experience of working in the Italian Cohesion Agency over the past few programming periods on this particular subject of investment in cultural heritage and cultural and creative industries. And now you are in the presidency of the Council of Ministers in Italy, but also covering this area too. Sandra, please, we are very curious to learn from your experience and from what Italy was doing over the past years and now as well. Please.
Thank you. Thank you. Shall I, is this one? Can you see it?
Super, yeah.
Okay, so let's start immediately. Oops, sorry. This is the framework, the Italian framework, and in the center you can see all the kind of programs. We have actually 38 regional programs and 10 national programs, plus 10 of the territorial cohesion and cooperation, sorry. Just to say that all of them deals with the culture in different manner. So the 38 regional programs, of course, they deal with what the OECD just mentioned as growth roads, community infrastructures, basically. Why? On the other hand, the Ministry of Culture has a national program dedicated to culture, something like Peter from Slovakia just mentioned. So it is more on the big, large infrastructures. Plus, we have the inclusion, another national program dealing with the Ministry of Labor, so social inclusion, and also they deal with culture, but as DG Regio mentioned, the 4.6, so the objective 4.6, so it's culture for inclusion. Then we have another national program dealing with capacity building. So capacity building, it's an aid to all administrative levels, regional, local, national, to implement faster and better. And last but not least, the national program dedicated to cities, which I'm focusing a little bit more because it includes all kind of possible projects. So it's a bit over comprehensive. And this, the dichotomy of culture in regulations, as our colleague from DG Regio mentioned, we in EU funded in this programming period deal with culture through basically two specific objectives. One is within the priority 4, which means a more social Europe, and in particular the specific objectives for 6, which is dedicated to enhance culture and sustainable tourism, but with the objective to create social innovation and social inclusion. And the Jolly, the new priority of this programming period, which is a jolly because it may include all the other specific objectives, which is priority 5, OP5. And it's Europe closer to citizen, and it's really a good start. Why I mention this? Because actually this dichotomy, so something is in OP4, something in OP5, it is the result of a negotiation at the beginning between the DG Regio and DG Employment, but at the end we have a sort of not so strict architecture in the regulations. Why? Because the regulation mentioned this specifically culture in the specific objective 4.6, so we have culture mentioned there, and no other field of interventions, no indicators following these specific objectives. Plus, we mentioned the culture again in the field of interventions within OP5. But again, we do not have indicators. Why I mentioned that? Because Catalina before also highlight the problems of a real impact assessment of what's going on. And without indicators set at the European level, we will not be able to measure in a common way the results we get. So basically, to cut the things, we both have these two kind of opportunities to develop culture, so to use the cultural strength in two different directions, either social, either territorial disparities, territorial development, but with indicators and field of interventions that basically will be different from country to country. Then, this is an example of the regional program, and I mentioned Emilia-Romagna, and I see that OECD has created actually a focus on Emilia-Romagna, and it's true. Emilia-Romagna is a really good case because they have local regulations, so regional and also local at the level of cities regulations that enable the co-programming, projecting with local authorities, with the third sectors, so to to actually embed the development within the real local needs and with the idea of what the community really would like to rehabilitate in their own area, in their own urban area. And these are some examples. So the region has established these areas. These areas are meant and asked to co-create and present an operational program to managing authority to actually to create their own development. These people, these areas are intermediate bodies. On the other hand, we have what I call the National Operational Program, the Metro, dealing with cities. And it's a bit more complex because we have 14 metropolitan areas, which are intermediate bodies, plus 39 medium-sized cities which are beneficiaries. So, of course, intermediate bodies, they have the delegation from us, the managing authority, to create their own operational program, while the beneficiaries answer our calls. But it has been said this morning the importance of beneficiaries to be embedded in the process. Maria Varinia mentioned that it is true. It is really important because, of course, beneficiaries alone would not be able to answer the calls. Not all of them, especially medium-sized cities from the south of Italy, would not be able to answer the calls. So basically, we create procedures that we work with them to project their own activities, and then a second phase of sort of selection. So it's a bit complicated procedures. I'm not sure it is the right one because, as it was mentioned before, this co-creation, co-projecting, co-programming, it takes time. So now in this year, we actually are able to provide for money to start the implementation, but we spent 2 years, 2 and more years creating the co-programming. Co-programming is really time consuming. So it's very good, it's necessary, but structural funds has these time constraints that we cannot afford to lose time for the implementation. This is the governance model. So the managing authority has a sort of several tasks. Of course, one task is to set the procedures, and the other one is to deal with the 14 intermediate bodies, with expert groups, also enabling them to answer all the criteria, and then a special expert groups to deal with the 39 medium-sized cities, the beneficiaries, who has other needs. On the third column, the green one, you can see all the kind of tasks that we daily do in order to support all the stakeholders. And then this is the priorities, just to mention that we have both the first circle, the priority dedicated to culture for social inclusion, 4.6, plus the OP5, the third one, the violet, the other circle. And I'm going to focus a little bit about that. Also because you see the specific objective 4.6 is the development of tourist itineraries through participation of citizens and the most vulnerable members of the community. And again, the other kind of action mention the most vulnerable members. Why I tell you that? Because it was very interesting and shocking for me to hear by Slovakia, who had this national program embedded in the specific objective 4.6, and then showing the real good infrastructural cultural heritage of the country, and now the connection internet is not stable. I hope you can hear me still. And this is why, I tell you, because for us, DG Employment, when we negotiate our program, actually, in this case, for the 4-6, we were obliged to set indicators, output and result indicators dedicated to the most vulnerable people. And we were not able to do culture by culture, culture to enhance cultural heritage, culture to develop our own identity, local identity. This is possible with the OP5, not through the 4-6. And that actually it has been a problem for cities because beneficiaries, the 39 small, medium-sized cities dealing with cultural rehabilitation of ancient dismissed places, but with social objectives, this was very hard for them to find out projects like this. So of course they did, but we allocated an amount, a total amount of money, which was not used all of it. So we now have to rechange and reshape our program because they were not able to actually create such kind of narrow, specific projects asked by DG Employment. So basically, again, it seems that the Commission sometimes, the geographical desk, change their own approach according to countries. It's not, a fault, but it's a fact. And this is the OP5. I'm not entering into the detail, but just to mention that the OP5 is really a jolly, is really good because we can really go to promote the so-called place-based approach because we can include all the kind of activities according to the need of a territorial need. And here you can see in our program, we can deal with all these kind of activities. And I mentioned this, the cultural heritage in order as a driver to social, ecological and economic aspects is the field of intervention 166. The natural heritage connected to sustainable management system is the 167. I mentioned that because to show how important is the regulations in terms of what we can buy on the ground, what we can actually develop on the ground. So the regulation is not just a set of regulations. It is something that really then shape the opportunity on the ground. And so, of course, we just to highlight how the regulations affect the daily implementation. And then some examples. This is from the previous programming period because the present is ongoing, so we are still working on it. But from the past, an example of Florence, they create an application on the mobile to manage the touristic flow. In this case, is to try to bring the tourists to small, less important sites. And the problem was to create such an app dealing with private data. So it is exactly how we deal with private data in order to know people, the interest, where they are, and so on and so forth. And the other one is from Turin. Turin, there are several small places in the city which are dismissed, in particular the newspaper kiosks. And they create, thanks to the local community, they create services to the urban areas, elderlies, person with some problems, handicapped, and so on and so forth, to create services for the area. and so it's more about the what we call the grassroots community infrastructure. No? I mentioned this kind of exercises because it's true that they are far more difficult. Because of course, if you do a call to small and medium enterprises, or you decide to create or to refurbish a big cultural heritage event area. We call it easy project because you do the call and they answer. You deal with one stakeholder, the museum or the area, and then the entity who manages such an area, and then you decide and then you implement. In this case, these are small projects that are very difficult to shape because you have to identify who are the local people on the ground dealing with possibly bringing such good practices. And another example of such a difficult but very effective project is in Milan. We call it a school of social civic school. So it's schools made on the neighborhoods with people of the neighborhoods and creating such a schools that actually they are also a mean to social inclusion, especially for migrants or for difficult children and so on and so forth. So, but very good example, very good practices. And this is from Rome, and this was a study. You see this colored round. Exactly, these are the local communities that are actually doing something on the neighborhood, on the ground. The color shows which are their own target. For example, the blue is the culture. So the associations, the local associations are dealing with culture. The yellow are dealing with social. And so the town council in these specific neighborhoods that you can see with these dots, they see which are the communities active in the neighborhood, and then shape with them the projects so to rehabilitate such places that they would like to actually reuse in a cultural and social manner. So it's a long way. It's a difficult procedures, but very effective. The reflection, in fact, is this kind of exercises. So to work with the local associations, to shape with them the actions better for the community to develop, and then as a managing authority, create the programming opportunity for them to answer is a big, long procedures, but very effective. But and we believe that also this is the way in order to rehabilitate places, but not creating gentrification. So we can do it because we have this reform of Article 55. It's a new code for the third sector that enabling the so-called shared administration, but still it's not so well established. We are still working on this kind of on enabling all the local authorities being able actually to implement such an opportunity. Here the two pictures shows Bologna. There are two examples of Bologna rehabilitating these places through the community participation. And then the reflection is about this kind of urban rehabilitation through the local communities in order to establish what it is good for them, and so which is the local identity we would like to embed in our own projects. And this is the last final, I mean, the thought that we still think when we shape this kind of actions is a reconversion for who. So in order not to create gentrification, we have always to have in mind which is the procedures we set for who is going to actually use the project that we shape. So this was because as a managing authority, it's very easy for us to rehabilitate places, also cultural heritage places, very easy. But then, of course, it's very easy for Italy as well to develop tourism. So tourism is a big part of our economy. But as a managing authority now, we are wondering how we can do things in order for people to be more easy in their own urban peripheries, these places. So in order for us to do something for the community, to the real community. And of course, there is no one formula, but the main path is to work with cities themselves. So we work together. Thank you.
Sandra, thank you so much. This was extremely rich and very, very informative, and I have a lot of takeaways for our own work here at the OECD. I'm particularly interested, well, maybe we don't have time to have a discussion now, but you pointed to this difficulty of, on one hand, the need for co-programming, and we all say, well, co-program, co-create, etc., and the reality of things that it takes a long time. You said 2 hours, etc. I wonder if there are tips and tricks to shorten the time, if this is really typical just for culture, or it's typical across other fields as well of cohesion policy interventions. So I don't know if other colleagues would like to step in and share their views. And Sandra, if you have any kind of advice on how to shorten this co-programming, which is so needed. And you concluded by saying that this is one of the keys if you work with citizens, if you work with associations, also to even avoid the bad effects of gentrification, for example, as well. Everyone is sort of struggling in the case of success of such interventions. So I don't know, Sandra, if you have still some advice to give us, or maybe other colleagues, including OECD or European Commission colleagues, have views to share on this, how to shorten this co-programming.
My guess is that actually we have to reshape all the time the procedures. So when there is no procedures, or when there is such an innovative process, there is no regulations there. So all the time we have to reshape and rethink how to do things. So why Emilia-Romagna is so good? Because they actually have their own local regulations. They can grasp to these regulations and go. While the other regions, they do not have it. We as national level, we don't have it. So all the time we have to reshape, and takes time even to think which kind of procedures, and then to actually do. So in a bureaucratic country as we are, so maybe there are less bureaucratic countries that go faster. But for us, co-programming, it's the key, but still a challenging key.
Great, thanks. I don't know if other colleagues just raise your hand if you have a good solution for this thing. If not, let's move on. And we are now going to Bulgaria. Evelina, it's great to have you with us, because you also have the perspective of not the Ministry of Culture, but the Ministry of Regional Development and Public Works. So please tell us a bit more about support for cultural heritage and the cohesion policy in Bulgaria.
Thank you, and good morning to everyone. I will share my screen. Just a moment. Can you see it?
Yes, maybe full screen now. We can
Yes,
see the.
yes, just a second.
Super.
So, Bulgaria has a long experience in supporting cultural heritage since the pre-accession period, and then in 2007 when we joined the European Union. The culture and cultural heritage, as we heard until now, not only gives identity to the regions, but promotes tourism and can be a driver for sustainable development. And that's why in Bulgaria, the operational programs for regional development, co-financed by the European cohesion funds, cohesion policy, European Regional Development Fund in particular, support culture and cultural heritage. In the first period, 2007-2013, the focus was on monument restoration. And there was a specific scheme for support of marketing of the destinations with some soft measures for the beneficiaries to promote the touristic routes and festivals and immaterial cultural heritage as well. In the next period, we had specific priority axis dedicated to culture, regional tourism, and dedicated to cultural heritage with a focus on tourism. And we supported culture also in the framework of urban regeneration projects. And we upgraded this experience with the integrated urban development, and in the current period, 2021-2027, the whole program is programmed under priority policy objective 5, Europe closer to the citizens. And we support culture in the framework of integrated territorial investments. Very short on our experience from the previous programming period. The priority axis 1, integrated urban development, among all other measures, infrastructural measures, which included energy efficiency, urban transport, social, educational and health infrastructure in the cities, supported also cultural infrastructure, and mainly cultural centers, theaters, libraries, operas, and so on, including their adjacent spaces with some green infrastructure around, and as a horizontal requirement, improving access for people with disabilities. This included also the equipment and socialization of cultural assets within the infrastructure. Under priority axis 6, which is regional tourism, we supported restoration of cultural heritage sites, renovation of museum, fortresses, monasteries, cultural centers. The requirement was that all the sites are of national and regional importance. And we supported also digitalization and to create an integrated tourist product. We supported promotion of cultural roots and heritage-based tourism within this priority axis in an integrated project. The beneficiaries eligible beneficiaries were municipalities, Ministry of Culture, and religion institutions, which all monasteries and many of them are UNESCO sites. On the these small photos here is one of our proud. We are very proud of this project, which is supported under our program in the framework of urban regeneration and development. This is a former military hospital in Burgas, which was old and abandoned building. Then it got renovated and turned into a library and community center with support from our program, and mainly with financial instruments, but also grant. In the current period, as I already said, we support culture in the framework of integrated territorial investments approach. This is approach which comprises several programs. Our program, Development of the Regions, is the lead program, and our whole budget is dedicated to this approach, but all other programs with, which are supported by ERDF and ESF plus have participate in this approach with at least 10% of their budget. And here you can see the list of the programs, and we support integrated territorial investment concepts. This is the bottom-up approach, where the people, the communities, the municipalities, they gather, and in partnership they make such packages of integrated projects within an ITI concept, which should correspond to the integrated territorial strategy for development of the NUTS2 regions. Very important here, you can see the program Human Resources Development, which with ESF Plus measures supports creative industries within the approach. What is included in our program as measures for support of culture and tourism? Preservation and development of cultural heritage, again, based on what we have experienced in the previous programming periods. We support infrastructure and equipment for all type of cultural organization sites and buildings. What we included as in measures and obligatory measures on the recommendation of the Ministry of Culture, the creation of key registers and digitalization of cultural values, and development of plans for the protection and management of immovable cultural heritage sites. Within the same package of measures, we support also preservation and development of natural heritage, and we have very good ideas from the municipalities for integration of cultural heritage and natural preservation in this period. And we also support accessible small-scale infrastructure and soft measures, so popularization, marketing, festivals, to encourage the development of local landmarks and attractions, including the promotion of sustainable forms of tourism. These measures, they are not supported in a particular projects. There is no scheme only for culture. We support them within integrated territorial investment concepts. So in the concepts, we have all possible types of combinations with infrastructure under our program, which is infrastructural measures for economic activity, industrial parks even, energy efficiency and sustainable renovation of building stock, sustainable urban mobility, road infrastructure and safety, green urban infrastructure and security of public spaces, and also social, health, educational infrastructure and equipment. I cannot keep from mentioning that we also had long negotiations with DG Employment about PO4 measures, but we just took and we included a commitment under the project that specific budget within the PO5 priority will be dedicated to social health and educational infrastructure and support. Eligible beneficiaries under the program for all of the measures, here we don't support only municipalities and state public institutions as in the previous periods. Our programs were dedicated exclusively to public infrastructure. In the current period, all kind of stakeholders could become beneficiaries under the program. Type of support at co-financing. In the period 2014-2020, there was an obligatory combination of grant and financial instrument for the projects. I just forgot to mention, in 2007-2013, we supported 100% grant from the program, which was 95% ERDF and 5% national co-financing. In the current period, in 2014-2020 period, the grant from the program is 85% ERDF, 15% national co-financing, and for cultural heritage and projects obligatory combination with financial instruments, at least 15% financial instrument in two separate operations. The grant is provided by the managing authority and the financial instrument by the urban development funds we had. Beneficiaries ensured own financing for pre-financing and reimbursement, but if they have already when they have already concluded a procurement contract for the construction works, they can apply for 35% of the grant for advance payment. In the current period, we could provide up to 100% grant. Why? Because the experience in the previous period showed that a lot of cultural projects cannot generate enough revenue to be supported and to make sustainable projects to be supported with financial instruments. That is why we provided possibility for 100% grant. This is depending, of course, on the revenue generation and potential and the applicable state aid regime. Our beneficiaries could apply for a grant for combined support in a single operation, up to 50% grant and 50% financial instruments. But they can also apply within the program for support under two separate operations, where they, if there is a revenue generation potential, we of course apply the state aid regime depending on the project, which could be de minimis. It could be also Article 53 of the General Block Exemption Regulation, and also Article 56 for small-scale infrastructure, 55, excuse me, and also regional aid. And depending on the financing and the type of beneficiary, we have different types of pre-financing, advance payment for the implementation of the projects. There is a 45% grant for public beneficiaries and 10% for non-public beneficiaries if the measures, if the construction measures included in the projects are more than 5 million euro. If the measures are, construction measures are below 5 million euro, the pre-financing could be 20%. And if there is a state aid regime or de minimis, only there is a 40% of the grant as advance payment. But here is one exclusion, that only 1% of the grant could be provided without any documents, just a payment request, if the infrastructural measures are more than 5 million euro. If it is below 5 million euro, they can receive the full percentage of the grants as shown. If it is more, they should first have a contract with the contractor. They receive 1% in advance, and the rest of the advance payment when they have a contract for the construction works. And project selection and management. In 2007-2014, I'm sorry, just to include the charger.
Yes, please do connect to electricity. We don't want to. We want to hear the end of your presentation.
I'm sorry. In the previous periods, we had specific procedures only for cultural heritage and cultural infrastructure, and they could be through competitive calls. When we speak about municipalities or religious institutions, or direct award, such direct awards received the Ministry of Culture in a procedure similar to the program which the Slovak colleague already presented for public-owned infrastructure. In the current period, we have two-phase selection model. At the first phase, this is a very long project of period of forming partnerships, creating concepts, what the concept will include, and then the beneficiaries apply in front of the regional development councils. Regional development councils select ITI concepts which could receive support under the programs. In the second stage, these concepts are selected in compliance with the integrated territorial strategy of the respective region. We have 6 regional development councils, and the beneficiaries from the respective regions applied to the councils. In the phase 2, when the ITI concept is already approved, the beneficiaries prepare detailed project proposals which are submitted to the managing authority. And the managing authority makes an appraisal, and in some programs like competitiveness or human resources, depending on the requirement of the state aids regimes, they make also selection procedures, but in most cases, beneficiaries with approved ITI concepts, and especially under our program, they become direct beneficiaries. They have the right to receive the grant approved within the concept. We just make some adjustments to the project to become more sustainable and feasible to apply. And when the projects are approved by the respective managing authority, each project is implemented by the corresponding institution, which is responsible for the project. Within the PDR, Program Development of the Regions, the projects are always integrated. We have one project for one ITI concept. And if there is a cultural infrastructure within the project, the respective cultural institution is responsible for the implementation of the activities, or municipality, because the municipalities in most cases are owners of the infrastructure. Project applications are submitted through the National Electronic System, and the institutions, as I already mentioned, manage the projects individually. Of course, we have different supporting measures to our beneficiaries to support the implementation. There are guidance documents for each stage of implementation of the projects, different templates for payments, for reporting. We have a lot of information days and workshops, especially about this, as this ITI approach is very new for Bulgaria. We implement this for the first time. We have a contract with the World Bank, and they make a lot of events for ITI projects and support our beneficiaries with ideas, with tips for implementation and so on. And of course, there is a continuous monitoring and evaluation. And this is the end of my presentation. As a conclusion, I will just say that there are a lot of projects which could become drivers for economic development and generate income, but a lot of creativity and imagination and innovation is needed on the part of the beneficiaries to support such projects. We have very good examples of such projects, but unfortunately, most of the infrastructure requires a higher grant than we would like to provide. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Evelina, and thank you so much also for going into the technical aspects, co-financing and project selection and management, something that I know that the Ministry of Culture of the Slovak Republic is particularly interested in learning from this exchange. Well, I'm afraid I'm not doing my job well. We are a little bit behind the schedule now. So without further ado, I'm turning to, let's go to Ireland now. Rose Power, you are from the Southern Regional Assembly in Ireland. And we are very interested to hear more about this Thrive project, about how you regenerate city centres through adaptive reuse of cultural heritage. Please, Rose.
Thank you very much for the opportunity today to share with you our project. I just want to check that you can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay, so my name is Rose Power. I work with the Southern Regional Assembly, which is a managing authority in Ireland, and in particular managing ERDF funding for 2 of our regions. So I know we're running a bit behind, but hopefully I'll get through the slides here now. So our scheme that I'd like to share with you today is the Town Centre First Heritage Revival Scheme, or as we fondly refer to it, Thrive. It's 120 million of a funding scheme that's delivered both by the Southern Regional Assembly and the Northern and Western Regional Assembly in Ireland. So it covers the whole of the Republic of Ireland. And the objective of the fund is to basically fund integrated urban strategies and capital projects that look at vacant or derelict heritage buildings in our cities and towns and look at potential adaptive reuse of those. So we deliberately split our funding out into 2 strands, and I'll talk about those individually and why we did that. So we initially provided funding of up to 200,000 for our cities and towns so that they could create an integrated urban strategy. And we wanted this to be fully aligned to the values and principles of the new European Bauhaus. So we're very much looking for this to be a participatory approach using a lot of citizen and stakeholder engagement, looking at multidisciplinary teams coming to the fore to assist them in the creation of these integrated strategies, and also in that regard, making sure that any of the projects that are identified through this process are all sustainable, inclusive, accessible, and aesthetically beautiful to comply with the requirements of the new European Bauhaus. We deliberately did a strand 1 at the initial stages because it gave us an opportunity to build the capacity. We hear about building the capacity of beneficiaries, and through the process of breaking out our calls, it allowed us a 12-month window to raise the capacity of our beneficiaries from everything from the new European Bauhaus values and principles to sustainable development, do no significant harm, and all the other nice to have things that are required under ERDF funding. So we provided a suite of capacity building for them. And we also worked with the European Urban Initiative and created a 2-day event where we dedicated 2 days to our beneficiaries to workshop all the areas of the new European Bauhaus so that they fully understood how they should engage with citizens, how they need to approach it, how they could map their stakeholders and citizens that they needed to be engaged in these projects. So that gave us that window of opportunity. And then we opened our calls, our Strand 2 call, which would provide funding of up to 7 million for projects that were identified within the Strand 1 integrated strategy, and that were vacant or derelict, owned by our local authorities, and that could act as a catalyst for further urban regeneration in that particular town or city. In order to encourage our beneficiaries, who are all local authorities, to avail of the funding, we basically provided 100% funding for these projects, because I think, as some of the speakers mentioned before, when you're talking about heritage buildings, cultural buildings, they're not, you need additional funding. It's not viable on a commercial basis, and therefore, in order to encourage the local authorities to apply for funding, we provided 100%. We didn't, however, provide any pre-financing, so we deliberately didn't do that on the basis that we wanted to be able to see step by step as they were progressing and providing payment claims, that they were also producing outputs that were actually showing their compliance with all of these requirements that we would have set out in our guidelines. So the real purpose of this particular scheme is to reduce vacancy and dereliction in Ireland's towns and cities, and also then to mainstream the values and principles of New European Bauhaus in regeneration in Ireland. And it's the first time that we've used New European Bauhaus in this way. As we're in the southern, eastern and Midland region, which is the area that I'm in, we're a more developed region. So we receive 40% funding from the EU and 60% then is provided by nationally by the Government of Ireland for our schemes. So what have we been doing up to this point in time? So in this programming period, 21 to 27, we've had 3 calls. In our particular region, we had 90 million available, and that 90 million has been fully absorbed under the projects. So we had 15 local authorities who were awarded funding for integrated urban strategies. We've had 14 local authorities who specifically identify projects which have now been awarded funding to regenerate vacant or derelict heritage buildings in their towns and cities that were identified in the original integrated strategies. And we currently have 3 full-time project managers in the Southern Regional Assembly managing these 4 capital projects. So a whole body of work happened here, but what I would say is at the outset, because of all of the capacity building, if we had had another 100 million, we could have probably absorbed it because these were competitive calls, and at the outset, we knew the demand was out there for this kind of funding. And what we did was, on a competitive basis, each and every application would be scored, and obviously the highest scoring and best projects would be funded under our scheme. So what kind of call and selection process did we have? Well, there's no intermediary body. The calls and the projects are managed directly by the managing authority, directly through contracts, grant agreements with our beneficiaries who are all local authorities. So we would have designed and opened all the calls, and all the applications would have been made directly to the managing authority. And once the deadline for the calls happened, what we then undertook was a pre-evaluation assessment of each of the applications to first of all make sure that they were all eligible funding, that they met the prerequisite mandatory requirements of our call. And within that, we would have provided a 50-page guidance document to all our beneficiaries in relation to applying for funding under this particular scheme. We then, as a managing authority, would have completed a summary report of all of the applications. We would have undertaken site visits to each of the particular buildings and met with each of the beneficiaries. And in addition to that, we employed an independent quantity surveyor to basically review all of the project costings that were submitted with the applications and for them to undertake a site visit. So a huge body of work happens between the point of the application being submitted and the award of funding. All of this information then would have been provided to our independent evaluation panel for Thrive, and they would then review all that information, score the applications and recommend applications for funding. But once they recommended application for funding, the managing authority would have stepped back in to take over again and basically officially select the operations. So the difference, I suppose, between this ERDF scheme and other ERDF schemes is, and I'll get to it in a moment, but we're probably one of the first regional programs that actually assigned scores to compliance and alignment with New European Bauhaus. So as I mentioned, all of our calls were competitive, so therefore only the highest scoring applications were funded. Each application under the 4 assessment criteria had to achieve a minimum score of 60 and an overall score of 70 for the total score to be eligible for funding. You'll see the 4 assessment criteria there. Strategic is in relation to our alliance with the priorities here in Ireland and in our region. Relevance is relevant to the guidance that would have been provided for the building types, the level of dereliction or vacancy. Impact is in relation to New European Bauhaus, so how they align to New European Bauhaus and how the project application demonstrated their alignment to all of the values and principles of the New European Bauhaus, including their sustainable measures and positive interventions to create biodiversity, to prevent any pollution and so on and so forth. And then delivery was how advanced were they in being investment ready for these projects. And you'll note that the weighting for impact, which is New European Bauhaus, and delivery is higher than the strategic and relevance. And on that basis, there was no application that wasn't fully compliant with New European Bauhaus values and principles could possibly get through. In any event, they all scored exceptionally high, the ones that were funded. But what it did do for us was it created, because of the two strands, it created a situation where this became a bottom-up approach. It's very much citizens at the heart of all of these projects, from the very initial stage of sitting down and interacting with citizens to see what the needs were in that particular community, what buildings were vacant and derelict in the area, and what potential adaptive reuse could then be delivered through the building to meet the needs of the community. And very much a co-design, co-creation process that, by using New European Bauhaus as a major tool for us in our approach to the scheme, ensured that all of the projects will be fully accessible, inclusive. There's an opportunity for all to actually participate in these projects, and that a whole multidisciplinary team came together in our local authorities with their stakeholders in order to deliver these projects. And some of the real success stories that came out of this is very much it allowed particularly migrant communities, which every town and city across Europe has experienced, to find a place where they were welcomed, to integrate them into the community because they participated in these projects, and obviously to respect their traditions as well as our Irish cultural and heritage, but also to incorporate other approaches, other points of view into it. What we've also discovered by using this particular approach, projects that would otherwise maybe have received a lot of objections through the planning process. We've had projects under Thrive where there has not been one single objection, because the whole of the community came together and participated in the whole process from the very, very outset. All their views were listened to, and what they were ultimately delivering as part of these projects was what was needed in the community. So we've never seen a situation where there's been zero planning objections to projects historically, and that's what we're experiencing now under Thrive. So in relation to the project management for those schemes then, so all of the initiatives that would have been outlined in the project application submitted, that in any way provided or demonstrated the alignment with New European Bauhaus values and principles, do no significant harm, sustainable development, conservation actions and initiatives, preservation of heritage and culture, all of those items that they advised us in their applications they would do then became outputs in our grant agreements. And all of the participants, before they ever submitted a application under Thrive, were all advised to not put something into an application for funding that they didn't then believe that they were capable of delivering, because we would require, as part of our grant agreement with them, that they be delivered as part of the project. So from the very, very outset, it wasn't a matter of we're going to do everything with this project to tick boxes, to get scores. They ultimately knew before they actually applied, if they tell us that they're going to put a green roof on something, then that's going to become an output. If they tell us that there's a certain standard of solar panels going to be used to make it more sustainable, then that had to be delivered. So we're it's very important from our perspective that what our independent evaluation panel adjudicated on and scored is then delivered in these particular projects. In addition to that, we have a requirement in our grant agreements that the managing authority must approve the appointment of the main grant contractor. And the reason for that is when they get to the point of choosing a main contractor, we can check to ensure that the contract, the final design, the budget, and the timeline also include all of the outputs that are actually in the grant agreement that's signed by the beneficiary. We then use a project management template to track all the initiatives and outputs, which includes everything from the town team meetings, citizen engagement activities. If they told us that there was a certain certification of recycled materials or waste management plans, all of these items are all outputs. And we track the delivery of these in real time as the projects are progressing. And this allows us then to ensure that the project at the outset is progressing in line with the timelines that were originally submitted. It allows us to, when progress reports and payments claims comes in, it allows us to then see if everything is being delivered in accordance with what was set out at the outset. And we undertake these site visits and meetings with our beneficiaries every 6 months to ensure the timely delivery of the outputs and to make sure that we're not incurring any cost overruns or time delays in relation to the projects. In addition to that, and I know a lot of people alluded to the difficulty with intervention fields and indicators up to now, this particular scheme is under priority 5 on our ERDF scheme, and we didn't use 166, we used 168 and 169 intervention fields. One is for the number of integrated urban strategies and one is for the integrated urban investments. But we also put in a specific a number of specific output indicators, results indicators that we created ourselves. One is for the amount of square footage that has been regenerated, and the second one is that there's a minimum score that has to be achieved in a survey that will be delivered once the project is complete. And this survey will basically score the citizens' perceived impact of the project and how that has impacted their lives and their towns. So we very much take a broader view of just the delivery of the project. It's very much, does it continue to meet and facilitate citizens and citizens' needs that were originally identified in the integrated urban strategies that would have been developed? So what were the main challenges and kind of how did we overcome them? I would say one of the main challenges for us at the outset was senior management buy-in and support. New European Bauhaus, when we designed the scheme early on in the programming period, was very new. The concepts of it was new. It wasn't very well understood at national, regional, and local level. And what I would say is it was only through very early intervention with elected representatives basically explaining a lot of the concepts and why we were trying to do this in line with New European Bauhaus that we actually got that senior management buy-in. And I think you need that, because if you go down the route of ensuring everything is accessible, inclusive, aesthetically beautiful, sustainable, and using multi-level teams and multidisciplinary teams with huge citizen and stakeholder engagement, then you're going to find that you're going to come across challenges in the delivery of that. And a lot of those challenges will have to do with the time that it takes to do a lot of these additional asks. But we did get senior management buy-in, and a number of our elected representatives at both a national, regional and local level came on board to champion this particular scheme, which obviously from our perspective was very useful and positive. I think knowledge as well. Within the programming period, there was a number of new concepts introduced this time round, even outside New European Bauhaus, things like do no significant harm, climate proofing, much more focused on sustainable development. And I think you can't underestimate the need for training and capacity building, not just for your staff and your managing authorities, but for your beneficiaries and for the citizens that are going to partake in these projects. So we had a whole range of training, and some of that training was very much tailored for the Thrive scheme. Like we do a specifically tailored public procurement process around Thrive, and that's dedicated to the types of buildings and the types of issues that would be identified by them. We talk to our local authorities about state aid. This particular scheme, because its beneficiaries are local authorities for local authority owned buildings, is delivered on the basis of no state aid. However, the state aid may kick in at the time of how the building is going to be used into the future, or parts of it going to be let out to a commercial entity, and so on and so forth. So giving them that reassurance down the line after these buildings have been built. Another thing is the unknowns of heritage buildings. You know, till you put a shovel in the ground in a heritage building, you don't know what you're going to find. But what we did do as part of our funding under Strand 1, we provided funding for them to get conservation reports done, archaeological assessments done, heritage assessments, in order to identify as many of the unknowns as possible and to try and de-risk some of these projects. I think as well a challenge is the costs and just changing the mindset here. Very much, you know, we're all looking for value for money, and we need to deliver value for money in Ireland as in most European countries. But I think you have to have an actual understanding that the regeneration of a heritage building can't be assessed and compared to a commercial project. They're just so so fundamentally different. But that's not to say that they're not as valuable. So I think when you're looking at costs, you have to look at how these buildings contribute to society, to the communities in which they're based, and that it's not just purely a cost exercise, because if you do a cost exercise, most of these projects wouldn't be funded. Then looking at the viability of the adapted building. So very much as part of our process, we would have sought projected operational profit and loss accounts for the buildings adaptive reuse. And the reason for this is to look at, well, there's probably going to be shortfalls. How are these shortfalls going to be covered? And in a lot of cases, we have buildings that are funded under Thrive that are completely free to the public. And then we have others where part of the building may be let to a commercial operator of a cafe, who then generates sufficient income that funds the much more social aspects of the building. So looking at that at the outset, and for the beneficiary understanding, okay, either the local authority has the wherewithal to fund the ongoing maintenance and operational costs, or if not, is the adaptive reuse going to generate some income that contributes towards that, and looking at that from the outset. And also looking at one of the other things is adapting heritage buildings for modern use is not easy. You know, you have, you know, huge heritage artifacts, you have huge original elements in all of these buildings that must be restored, protected and maintained. And at the same time, we're asking them to make sure that all of these buildings, once they're done, are fully accessible to all, and that they're energy efficient and sustainable. So there is a balance between both of those. In a lot of cases, what we found in order to actually deliver this, we found that for these particular buildings, they involved a small amount of new build in order to provide maybe a lift shaft that would make accessibility through the building available to all. So there was elements of that. We also found, that in some cases there was adjoining buildings or buildings close by which were more suitable for putting solar panels on, as opposed to putting solar panels on the top of a heritage building. So they ran cables underground to deliver the sustainable energy measures, but not necessarily on the roof of the building that were funded. And I suppose one of the things that we would have discovered through the process of this particular scheme, whoever is going to lead a scheme of this nature, because you're talking about citizens' needs, you're talking about new European Bauhaus, you need to have the project lead for any scheme of this nature who is enthusiastic, passionate about the conservation of these cultural and heritage assets, and the implementation of new European Bauhaus values and principles in order to actually deliver on all of the citizen and community needs. So just to give you an idea of some of the projects that are funded under Thrive. So on the top, my top left, Gorey Market House, built in 1709. It was a market house, I think previously a prison. It was a town hall, and they're now going to convert that into a community house hub and a market plaza. So they're basically going to open up the original arches and all the backlands to this particular project in order to deliver what the community needs here. And it's actually the oldest building in Gorey that's been converted and will be fully accessible and open to the public and sustainable. The next one on the right is 18 Lady Lane, built in 1725. It's would have been an original townhouse on one of the oldest streets in Waterford City, and this is going to be turned into a children's museum, and they're going to deliver a lot of innovative technology assisted learning within the scheme. But I think one of the nice things about this particular one, we obviously asked them that all these buildings be accessible, and you can see on the bottom structure, which is the artist's impression of what looks like building blocks. That's a new extension which creates a lift that provides accessibility for the whole of the building. And in addition to that, they decided that not only to just put an accessible entrance to the front of the building, they decided to probably put one of the most impressive accessible entrances to a building that I've ever seen. And it's basically going to be, when you go through the accessible entrance from the main street, it'll be like following the White Rabbit down the rabbit hole in Alice in Wonderland into the unknown to learn and see. So it's going to be an amazing entrance, which we're looking forward to. Here's another one, St. Finan Seminary, Navan, built in 1857. It's an old seminary. At the moment is completely derelict. The roof is gone. The steel supports holding the building up. But you'll see below it what they're going to do. They're turning it into a community hub and county archive. And within the grounds of the building itself, there was a natural gradient, and they're now going to create within that, which is currently overgrown and not in use. They're going to create an outdoor amphitheatre for cultural performances to be done, and a meeting place for members of the public. On the right hand side is Mallow Town Hall, built in 1800. And this has been converted into a 200-seat theatre. And basically, again, will be fully accessible, but there's no theatre within Mallow Town, and within 50 kilometres of Mallow Town, there's no theatre. And based on the assessment in the community, this is what the community needed, and is going to provide the basis for cultural performances and creative spaces. And they'll actually convert it from an accessibility point of view. They'll not only have it accessible to members of the public who want to attend events at it, but there'll be accessibility brought in for any performer who has mobility issues or disabilities, will also be able to perform here in this new theatre that's being done. Now, I know we're running out of time, so what I've done here is, and I'm not going to go through all these, but you'll see the range of buildings, other buildings that were funded. Some are barracks, some are derelict sites, some are memorial halls and butter exchanges and, you know, historic buildings, libraries. So there's a range of buildings that's been funded under them. Here are some of the ideas around what's going to be converted into. But what I would say is they're all unique projects. They're all very much exciting projects that really the communities need, but they all will be delivered and fully accessible with full participation of citizens and stakeholders. They'll all be sustainable and they'll all be aesthetically beautiful to conform to and align with the new European Bauhaus. So hopefully I've made up a little bit of time, but I'm very happy to take any questions, and I've left the link to our website with all the information in relation to Thrive, its calls, and the projects that we're funding. So,
Rose, thank you so much. This is so rich and so much to learn from on all aspects, on technical and also it's very inspirational to hear what and how you do things, and good to hear that there is capacity to do more as well. Listen, I suggest to all those who are with us to maybe aim to finish at 1, if you can stay with us till then. I think we'll hear now from Wing. So now we heard from several countries. Now let's go a little bit upward to have a more broader perspective on the administrative capacity building for EU cohesion policy. So some high-level conclusions from the work that you have been doing for the last few years. Then I think Agnieszka wanted to say, we'll have a quick reaction to what we were discussing in this particular panel, and then we'll conclude with very brief closing remarks. I promise it won't be very, very long. Thank you. Wing, please, go ahead.
Great, thank you. I'm going to show my screen and hope you can see. So I'm going to add to what Marina mentioned this morning on administrative capacity building, and to share with you some key findings, data, OECD loves numbers, and also some practical examples of actions from different countries that we've worked with. Before I go into my presentation, just a very quick background of where all these insights come from. We actually worked with 6 different managing authorities and their beneficiaries in the past 2 years, really to understand what holds beneficiaries back when using EU funds and what in the remit of managing authorities can do to help them. And we've actually worked with the Emilia-Romagna region as one of the region participating in the pilot. And we also work with regional, national, indirect programs. And we understand it's a very diverse world. Different authorities have different setup. As the Ministry of Culture in Slovakia mentioned, they are acting as beneficiaries and then work with other cultural institutions. This is also the case in one of the regions participating in the project in Poland. It's also a unit in the Ministry of Regional Development acting as the beneficiaries and then distributing funds to support local authorities. So all the insights that I'm going to present indeed take into account this diversity. But essentially what we are trying to understand is the interaction between the bodies managing the fund, regardless they are managing authorities or IBs, and the one implementing project in the ground and how they can work better together. So I will show you 3 basically key messages. One is our finding what actually holds beneficiary back. What are some examples of actions that managing authorities can do? And at the end, 1 or 2 reflection of how basically what countries needed to continue building up beneficiary administrative capacity building. So what holds beneficiary back? What we find first is that this is a really complicated question, no surprise. We find beneficiaries' capacity gaps in accessing and using the fund actually shaped by various parameters. One of the parameters can be the program that they participate in. whether it's regional, national, or transnational program, whether it's small or large program, whether it's more concentrated, like focus on transport, culture, or more integrated, like regional development programs. So as you can see, this graph Verena also showed earlier, we can see most national programs, they tend to have a large envelope, but very few specific objectives, so are more concentrated, whereas regional program on the other spectrum. And we've heard from the previous speakers that cultural activities itself can be funded through different programs. It could be under national, regional, or even interact programs. We have seen cultural activity supports by cross-border programs, for example. And there are multiple specific objectives that can be related. So what does it mean? It's actually all these cultural projects may require a lot of strategic capacity, both on the management and beneficiary side, to actually think which program I should apply, what priority assets applies to me, how can I make synergies to with other projects around me, and these are all capacity needs will require from the beneficiary and especially the beneficiary side. The second parameter we see makes the difference is the organization type. So in the pilot projects, we actually conducted online survey of over 1,000 beneficiaries in the 6 places that participated in the project. And what we have found is that there are significant difference in terms of capacity needs, depending whether they are national public institutions, subnational public institutions, so typically municipalities, or non-public institutions such as NGOs or SMEs. And in the spectrum of cultural institutions, it could also be different depending whether national museums, subnational, or they can be NGOs working in the cultural sector. On the graph on the left, what we can see is that among subnational public beneficiaries, so municipalities, local government, for example, there's a stark need of thematic expertise. What that means is, for example, people that understand what is culture and creative industry, what is social economy, what is new Bauhaus, this kind of thematic concepts, and what are the projects supported. And this is really lacking among the surveyed local authorities, whereas it's less in NGOs and national public beneficiary. But what we see is they also face a lack of, for example, sufficient staff or technical expertise, which means in procurement, in financial control, this type of technical expertise. On the graph on the right, what we can see is also that non-public beneficiaries such as NGOs and SMEs, they tend to find accessing and using EU funds more challenging compared to the public ones. And this is the same regardless the application stage, implementation, or reporting evaluation. The third and the fourth parameters, it's about project size and experience. But what is interesting here is that what we find is that not so much that they will have different capacity needs, not necessarily beneficial with smaller projects, they will have more capacity gaps. But we find that those with larger investment, and if they have experience, they're more likely to be consulted by the authorities across the program. This may not, it's not usually out of the intention of the authorities to forget about the small ones or newcomers, but it's more, sometimes there's occasions that those are the ones less likely to speak up, so their voices are less likely to be taken into account in the project design, in the program design. I will quickly go through this. What we find is also across the whole process of implementing funds, many beneficiaries, actually most beneficiaries, find the most challenging part is to understanding the cause and complementing the analysis before the project, so such as feasibility studies. Whereas during implementation, keeping up with the milestone and timeline, as well as keeping pace with the regulation changes are considered most challenging. even more so than complying with the regulation itself. So the difficult part is actually to keeping pace with the changes. So those are some of the findings from the surveys and the studies that we did. What we show is really clearly that beneficiary capacity needs are very diverse. But what can the authorities, the managing the funds and working with beneficiaries can do? Based on all the experience, we did develop the framework of 4 pillars, moving from inside the authorities, how they can organize their teams and human resources, to what type of tools and mechanisms they can use. So for example, under pillar 1, it's a recurring challenge we heard from authorities. We don't have enough people. We can't always work with beneficiaries. And here we have identified there are actually a lot of people, usually in authorities, working with beneficiary here and there, but it's not always clear how and when and who they are working with. So here we have developed concrete actions for a lot of authorities, for example, to define the mission statement, or organizing internal information sections, or appoint a thematic expert just within the authorities to actually coordinate and guide colleagues what are the best way to support and communicate with beneficiaries outside of the authority. The second pillar, what we focus on, is a very interesting pillar, because we heard from many authorities that they know their beneficiary very well. They have worked with them for many programming periods. I know exactly what they need, which makes them usually skip a step of analyzing what is actually happening in the ground. We have worked with authorities that are working with thousands of beneficiaries. There are also authorities working with 10 for the past 10 years. But even in both cases, we realized there is a really lacking of this analysis component. And usually it doesn't have to be resources intensive. What we recommend to many authorities, for example, have an Excel documenting what are the project blockage that you have seen when you're talking to beneficiaries, or having a pre-call online consultation just to check with beneficiary when you develop the application, what are some blocks, major blocks, or in the case of Denmark, I think working with thousands of SMEs, so they just pick 100 and have a conversation with them to develop a beneficiary journey. What is it like? Where are the real blockage for you? So this type of analysis, from light to heavy, usually depending on the managing authorities' needs, could be really important and helpful. The third pillar is about how to provide technical support and effective communication with beneficiary. One thing we heard really often is we have developed the guide, but they don't read it, because no one has time to read the PDFs. But we have seen a lot of innovative action in this regard as well, such as a simple online booking system to quickly match the beneficiary with whoever in your team that actually can provide direct answer. There's also a lot of mentoring experience. So, for example, beneficiaries with more experience can match with newcomers, so they can share peer exchange experience. Last but not least, it's also working with many external actors, understanding that managing authorities, IBs, they are not the only one working with those institutions. There are consulting companies out there, there are experts out there, there's NGOs out there that they can all provide insights and support. So those are some very practical examples. I believe Katia also provides some links in the agenda. If you want to look for more specific cases, you can consult the reports. I'm going to finish my presentation with just 2 reflections, looking at the cross EU. In our research, we also trying to identify across EU what are some efforts and resources that have been dedicated to beneficiary capacity building. It's still difficult, as many reasons, but we try to estimate, and we find that there are actually many countries have been doing very innovative use in beneficiary support. In Latvia, the technical assistant actually be used to develop a system, electronic system to help facilitate the exchange between beneficiaries and MA. In Sweden, they create a central coordination small team, try to standardize regional offices service. So I think from our perspective at the EU level, peer learning, it's really, really important. There are so many interesting examples and ideas out there, and peer learning is really a key to understand better what can be done. And finally, there are some reflections. We understand it's a complicated process of building capacity, and program authorities themselves, beneficiaries themselves also need support to do it. For authorities, they need to have a clear role. What exactly should they provide? Where's the line? They need tools for peer learning. They also need to have the know-how, how to do the analysis, for example. And for the beneficiaries, usually what we hear is that if the system is too complicated itself, why are we spending time to build the capacity to do this? So we also see that at the cross-EU level, there is a need for really simplification, but from the perspective of the beneficiaries. And we believe that program authorities can provide insights in this regard. So those are some just reflections to conclude. I hope I'm within time, and with that, I would like to conclude my presentation. Thank you very much.
Super, thanks so much. And of course, I just shared in the chat the links to the publications that you were mentioning and to the toolkit. So everything is accessible online for free. Please consult. Well, I think now I will turn to Agnieszka. Agnieszka, you wanted, after all these different presentations, maybe to provide a quick feedback and reflection and reaction, please.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. In fact, this was very interesting, very inspiring. Thank you for inviting me and also having this opportunity to listen to all these practical approaches, but also to really a quite heavy amount of more theoretical knowledge, let's say. So I think that for me, this is really a very good combination. And well, I left I finished my presentation hoping that maybe some of my remarks can be food for thoughts for you. On the contrary, you are leaving me with a lot of food for thoughts and a lot of inspirations, a lot of problems to think of, and a lot of topics to furtherly introduce in the discussions on the Commission side as well. So many, many thanks for that. So I'm very grateful for being able to listen to your different approaches and also to your different realities that you are living in. Now I'm referring to the practical presentations, if I may say so. So we could see really different realms, like, well, Slovakia trying to operate within one operational program. On the contrary, Italy working in the myriad of programs and the very complicated structure of different interlinked documents. So that's another reality, also quite difficult to embrace. So Bulgaria showed also a kind of evolution and how new instruments are also involved in implementation of the projects. So mentioning of ITI, from my perspective, the regional territorial policy was very interesting. Many thanks to Rose for providing this practical information, the application elements about project management. So I think this is something that we can really learn from. And also the Thrive perspective, very strong focus on European Bauhaus. These are the things that make us, I think, also implement these elements in the projects. I think that our meeting today proved one thing that was, I will refer to Rose's presentation again. In one of the last slides, you wrote that, well, for the projects of this kind, you need really enthusiasts. And I think that we all showed today that we are enthusiasts in what we are doing, devoting so much time and wanting to share as much knowledge as possible. So I think that this is also a good sign for the future. And just final sentence, I think that in all the presentation, it was very visible that culture really has a great potential to be the engine of development, right? It touches and embraces so many elements that it can produce thorough strategies, thorough policies. And let's hope that culture and cultural heritage projects will be developing more and will have more prominent role in the next programming period as well. So thank you very much once again.
More prominent role, that's, I think, everyone in this room wants to to hear, really. Agnieszka, thank you very much. And
my
of
whole
course,
heart on that side.
Indeed, indeed. And of course, we'll be very happy to continue the discussions and this conversation beyond the workshop. Well, I would like to thank everybody, those who were providing the scene setting earlier today and this incredible wealth of experiences that we just heard through the country presentations, and my colleagues in the OECD who provided this very deep understanding and overall of how the structure works and how what are the tips to solve common challenges as well. I will not provide a very long summary remarks because anyway, as the next step, we will be producing a short briefing note summarizing the discussions today and highlighting what was said, etc. So everything will go in there. Maybe for me personally, two takeaways. One is this need that we also hear a lot when we work on culture and creative industries more broadly, is this need for better evaluations, for better indicators, for better data, not only to help governments channel their investment into the areas where they will produce most impact, but also for the cultural institutions, for the cultural organizations to be able to demonstrate their own impact as well. So there is a whole agenda of work there, maybe even more pressing and urgent than in other policy areas which are maybe more advanced in this. And then where I refer to what Sandra was saying, and there is a lot of maybe projects and opportunities to invest in projects on culture for inclusion, culture for employment, culture for urban regeneration. But let's not forget that culture needs to be supported per se. So there should be also supports for culture. Otherwise, all the other spillovers will not happen. So for me, that's the my concluding remarks. And now I'm turning to our host, to Branislav, or no, Peter, maybe it's you, Branislav, to maybe share with us a couple of remarks that you have to conclude this workshop.
To be honest,
Peter Branislav.
I think it's Branislav's part of the presentation, definitely not mine. But maybe on behalf of the whole Ministry of Culture of Slovak Republic, I would like to thank you all for your participation, for all the information you were sharing with us, and all the enrichments we get from the presentations. And again, thank you very much, and have a great day.
Thank you, Peter. Branislav, maybe now.
Thank you. There's always somebody coming in and coming out from the office, so sorry. Thank you very much, mostly to you, Ekaterina, for making this possible, but also to all those who contributed to this event and to making it possible, right? And also, I'm grateful to our colleagues from countries like Ireland, Bulgaria, Italy, and also Poland, who participated in the conference and shared the insights and the experiences with us today. And as I said, thank you for all those also who participated, and wish you a great day and enjoy the coming lunch. Thank you for me.
Yes, thank you so much. And my thanks also go to the Slovak Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the delegation of the Slovak Republic to the OECD for making this workshop possible as well. So thank you all. Thank you to the speakers, to the audience, and bon appétit.
Thank you,
Thank you very
everyone.
much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
For you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Katja, and thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Miroslav. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Bye.
Sandra. Bye. Ciao, ciao.